It wasn't until after I died that I learned the truth. I was the villainous side character in a story where everyone adores the main character. Reborn, all I wanted was to avoid the protagonist and her pack of adoring fans. But instead, they all came crawling back, begging me to treat them like I used to. What they didn't know was that I had returned with the same sickly body from my last life. And I was looking for an excuse to get my revenge. I was reborn, but I brought with me the disease-racked body that had been tortured to the breaking point in my past life. I secretly summoned the royal physician, who told me I had 6 months to live. A sense of relief washed over me, and I smiled. After all the suffering I'd endured, getting to live out my final days in peace, far from the love and hate of my past life, felt like a kindness from the heavens. My handmaiden, Daisy, chattered away, trying to cheer me up as she peeled grapes and popped them into my mouth. I was just starting to relax, gently rocking in my lounge chair. The sound of hurried footsteps approached, followed by a gust of wind. I cracked my eyes open just enough to see the furious face of my brother Leo. Leo, my only full-blooded sibling. Our mother passed away when I was 6 and he was just 2. For the 10 years that followed, we had only each other. Leo eventually ascended the throne, being our father's only son. After his coronation, he became one of the main character Claire's biggest fans. The decade I had spent protecting him and ensuring he grew up safely was long forgotten. When he discovered that I was constantly at odds with Claire, consumed by jealousy, he began to see me with nothing but suspicion and anger. Now he stood before me, his brow furrowed in a mask of uncontrollable rage. "Alara, did you poison Claire? Hand over the antidote, now." The pathetic little boy who used to trail behind me, calling out sis, now barked my full name at every opportunity. I opened my eyes a fraction wider, swallowed the grape in my mouth, and parted my lips. "No. It had better not have been you." His eyes were dark as he gripped my wrist, hissing the warning before turning to leave with a flick of his sleeve. I'd lost count of how many times this had happened. Ever since Claire appeared, whenever she and I had a conflict, Leo would unconditionally side with her. If she was involved in any way, and I was even remotely connected, the blame was thrown at me without a second thought. Watching his retreating back, a sneer formed on my lips, and the look in my eyes was no longer as gentle as it once was. "You'd better not waste your time on me any later, and another one of her admirers will have already saved Claire." After all, this whole poisoning drama was just a scheme cooked up by Claire and her family. The goal was to make Leo and Julian utterly despise me, clearing the path for Claire's rise to power. Leo's retreating figure stiffened. Perhaps he'd never been spoken to with such an attitude from me before. He turned back, a flicker of shock on his face. But I didn't look at him again, simply closing my eyes and feigning sleep. The words that escaped my lips were sharp as ice. "The little Leo the first knew is gone. He's dead to me." His eyes blazed with even more anger, the rims turning red. "What are you talking about? Have you gone mad? So annoying." I was on the verge of death, and he still wouldn't leave me in peace. I kept my eyes shut and said nothing more. Through the haze of my drowsiness, I thought I heard a very faint whisper, "Sis." So quiet it could have been my imagination. The footsteps faded, no longer carrying the forceful stride from his arrival. There was a hint of disappointment. What did he have to be disappointed about? I laughed at my own foolishness. Back then, our mother's family had no influence, and after she died, we were left helpless and alone. The palace servants assigned to us stole and sold off our mother's belongings and skimped on our meals. Leo was still a small child then, in the middle of a growth spurt, and he often cried from hunger. To make sure he had enough to eat, I fought a royal consort's dog for scraps. When I was caught, I was beaten senseless. Before I turned 8, my body was a constant canvas of new bruises layered over old ones. Later, I snuck into the neglected wing of the palace and agreed to be the goddaughter of an exiled foreign consort, massaging her shoulders, washing her clothes, anything to earn a bit of protection. It was just enough to get by. The palace servants would often gamble, and when they lost, they'd take out their frustrations on my brother and me. I would shield my little brother as heavy hands struck my back, leaving purple and blue bruises on my arms and legs. A tiny Leo would curl up in my arms, his grubby little hands wiping away my tears, murmuring over and over, Sis, when I grow up, no one will ever dare bully you again. Ah, and now, the one bullying me is none other than you, my dear brother. Whatever. In this life, I just want to live out my remaining days in peace. I want no part in these dramas of love and hate. A short while later, Leo's chief attendant, Thomas, arrived with a procession of servants carrying an array of rare treasures. Princess, you see? His Majesty still cares for you deeply. Cares? Or is it guilt from a pricked conscience? Whatever he was thinking, I couldn't care less. As long as you don't cross Miss Claire. Let Lord Julian and Miss Claire have their happily ever after. Your good days, Princess, are just ahead. Thomas simpered, his voice syrupy and fawning. I frowned and walked into my room without a word. The words of a bootlicker's lackey were just as nauseating. But he was right about one thing. If I wanted peace, I had to stay away from Julian and let him and Claire be together. The thought of Julian sent a dense wave of pain through my heart. Julian was the male lead of this, everyone adores the main character story. He had a powerful family, was impossibly handsome, and suffered a loveless childhood. Claire was the single ray of light in his unhappy youth, his salvation. Even after he grew up, seized power with ruthless tactics, and became the youngest marquis in the kingdom, a single frown from Claire would still throw him into a panic. Unfortunately, I was the wrench in the works between them. My mother and Julian's mother were the dearest of friends. Before they passed, they arranged for us to be married. I grew up knowing that Julian was my future husband. Julian's mother died from complications 2 years after he was born. My mother, feeling sorry for the motherless boy, often brought him to the palace to play. Nearly all my memories before the age of 6 included Julian. When we played house, he always played the groom, telling me with the seriousness of a little adult that he would be good to me for the rest of his life. Then my mother died, and Leo and I lost our protection. Julian never came to the palace again. And I never heard any news of him. But every year on his birthday, I would make a gift by hand and hide it in a small box, sometimes a pressed leaf, other times a meticulously stitched sachet. One time, Claire accidentally found out about this box. She flew into a jealous rage and locked herself in her room, crying for 3 days straight. Julian waited outside her family's estate for 3 days, but she wouldn't relent. No matter how much he explained or promised, it was no use. In the end, Julian came to the palace to demand our engagement be broken, and Leo also pressured me to give up the betrothal. To sever the threads of our childhood connection felt like my heart was being torn apart. But I knew you couldn't force love, so I was prepared to let go. They, however, couldn't wait for me to slowly accept the cruel reality, and conspired to send me away in a political marriage. The funny thing is, I thought I was sacrificing myself for the peace of my country. It was only after I died that I learned they had cast me aside like trash just to please the main character. The day after I was reborn, I saw Julian again. I was at the famous Nightingale Club in the capital, a place where noble ladies spent fortunes just to win a smile from the club's top star. In my previous life, to maintain my dignified image as a princess, I never set foot in such a place of pleasure. Now all I wanted was to live my remaining 6 months freely, so naturally, I went wherever sounded interesting. A handsome young man to my left filled a cup and leaned in to offer me a drink, while a gentleman in purple to my right massaged my shoulders. In front of me, a man of unparalleled talent and beauty played the zither with graceful hands. I felt completely at ease. No wonder so many noble ladies flocked here. Just then, I heard the club's owner, Madame Rose, nervously welcoming Lord Julian. The next second, my wrist was seized, and I was yanked to my feet. Julian's refined, cold face was suddenly right in front of mine. A red mark was already forming where he gripped me, a dull ache spreading through my wrist. I couldn't break free. His brow was knitted tightly as he glared at me. What kind of poison did you give Claire? With my free hand, I waved dismissively at the terrified attendants, signaling for them to leave. Then, I turned to Julian with a radiant smile. What poison? Why don't you ask her? Perhaps my nonchalant, even mocking, tone infuriated him, because his grip on my wrist tightened. I hissed in pain. This body was like a fragile vase on the verge of shattering, especially sensitive to pain. The next moment, an angry shout echoed through the room. Insolence! Who gave you permission to lay a hand on the princess? Leo strode over and aimed a kick at Julian's chest. Julian dodged to the side, and the force holding me was released. I stumbled, but a pair of large hands steadied me. It was Leo. I wasn't surprised to see him here. Claire had a playful nature, and for her sake, Leo often left the palace in disguise. Right now, he stood before me like a lion protecting his cub, just as I had once shielded him from the lecherous gazes of lonely palace maids. If it weren't for Claire, I'd have you thrown in the dungeons for daring to touch the princess today. Leo berated Julian. Julian's face flushed red, and he opened his mouth to argue, looking utterly wronged. Your Majesty, she poisoned Claire. Leo glanced at me. She said she didn't. How could she admit it? Your Majesty knows how much the princess hates Claire. Claire has been bedridden since yesterday. Isn't Your Majesty worried? Julian raised his voice. She said she didn't, and I believe her. I shot him a surprised, sidelong glance. Leo's eyes were dark and serious. I will send my secret guard to find a master physician. Julian's face turned as black as the bottom of a pot, his gaze like daggers, as if he wanted to carve me up. If Claire knew how you were behaving, I wonder what she would think. He was seething, unable to stand another moment, and he hastily bowed and took his leave. Leo awkwardly sat down across from me, his eyes darting away. Sis, I believe you didn't poison Claire, right? A cold smile touched my lips. A moment ago, you were so certain in front of Julian, and now you're not so sure? Your trust means nothing to me. I took a sip of the tea beside me. A pity. The finest Dragonwell tea had gone cold, and it tasted worse than ordinary hot tea. To me, Leo was now like this cold tea. He had played no small part in pushing my body to its current broken state. What was a single, hesitant expression of belief worth now? Lao. My gaze landed on his face, a face I had cherished for over a decade in both this life and the last, now hateful and strange. After Mother died, the only thing that kept me going was protecting you, making sure you grew up safely. For that, I washed a mad consort's clothes, endured beatings and insults from the staff. I could bear it all. You grew up. You became the emperor. You'd never go hungry or be bullied again. I thought our suffering was finally over, but what was waiting for me? For the sake of that Claire, you hurt me and abandoned me, again and again. From now on, let's just go our separate ways. Let that be the end of our bond as siblings. Tears fell from my eyes like broken pearls. I thought I didn't care anymore, but why did it still hurt so much? Sis, Leo's eyes were red, and he stammered at a loss for words. I don't want you anymore, Leo. My fists clenched, my voice choked with sobs. As if he couldn't bear the torment, Leo fled in a panic. I unclenched my fists and leaned back in my chair, suppressing a cough. I remembered what the physician had said. Princess, you must not become agitated, or you won't even last the 6 months. It seemed that if I wanted to live out these last 6 months peacefully, I couldn't stay in this place of turmoil any longer. At the palace gate, to my surprise, Julian was pacing back and forth, waiting. He forced a smile and bowed slightly, intending to help me down from the carriage. I ignored him and ordered the driver to move on. Just as I closed my eyes to rest, Julian scrambled into my carriage like a monkey, instantly making the spacious compartment feel cramped. Ellie, I've been waiting at the palace gate for you for a long time. The feigned gentleness and hint of grievance in his voice were completely at odds with the chiseled features of a military man. I looked up at him annoyed. Ellie. It had been a long time since anyone had called me that. I remembered my mother calling me that so gently when I was a child, and Julian had followed her lead. Our childhood bond was like a dream. When we met again as adults, all that was left was the polite and distant address of princess. And when it came to matters involving Claire, even that politeness vanished, leaving only disgust. Thinking of how he had unhesitatingly schemed to send me away in a political marriage just to prove his heart belonged only to Claire, I felt a wave of nausea just looking at his face. Lord Julian, please address me as princess. Ellie is not a name for you to use. My tone was flat. I wanted nothing more to do with him. Princess. He ground out the word through clenched teeth. Then his voice softened again. Let's not fight anymore. Give me the antidote, please. My temper flared. Get out. He froze for a second, his eyes wide with disbelief as he stared at me. Whether as children or as adults, I had always treated him with kindness. I had never spoken to him so harshly. Then in a fit of rage he grabbed me by the throat. Elara. Don't push me. Tell me you have the antidote. I couldn't breathe. I felt the blood rush to my head, and my vision started to go dark. Cough, cough, let go. But he was like a man possessed, his grip not loosening in the slightest. I raked his hand with my sharp nails. The pain finally jolted him back to his senses. The pressure on my neck suddenly disappeared. I felt like a drowning person breaking the surface, gasping for air. But this body was just too fragile. After a few breaths, my vision went black, and I pitched forward. My forehead hit the corner of a stool, and after a moment of dizziness, I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was back in the palace. The room was filled with the thick scent of medicine. Daisy was no longer her usual cheerful self. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Leo and Julian were both there. Leo looked furious, while Julian was filled with remorse. A few old royal physicians were discussing my condition in hushed, trembling voices. So, they found out how sick I am. Well, I never intended to hide it, I just didn't want to cause a fuss. The moment I opened my eyes, Daisy noticed. She fell to her knees by my bed, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Oh, princess, you're so ill. I didn't even know it's all my fault. I reached out and patted her head. Don't cry. Your princess still has 6 good months left. At that, she cried even harder. Hearing the noise, Leo rushed over. The young emperor, dressed in his magnificent dragon robes, was usually composed even before the most seasoned court officials. Now his eyes were red, and he stood there, completely helpless. Sis, you're sick. Why didn't you say anything? Don't worry, I've already ordered the entire Royal Medical Academy to treat you. If that doesn't work, I'll issue a royal decree and search the entire kingdom for a master physician. We will cure you. I had Daisy help me sit up and gave a sad little smile. Don't trouble yourself, Your Majesty. If Your Majesty truly cares for me, then please grant me permission to go to the Abbey of Grace and take my vows. Let me live out the rest of my days in peace. No, a frantic voice shouted from the side. Julian stepped past Leo, his face ashen, his tone sharp. Julian, on what grounds do you say no? I ignored his outburst and looked at Leo. He pressed his lips together, silent. After a long moment, as if he had made up his mind, he uttered a single word. Fine. Leo ordered everyone to keep my illness a secret. My departure for the Abbey of Grace was set for 3 days later. During those 2 days, Leo and Julian kept finding excuses to visit me, which I found incredibly annoying. With the two of them no longer revolving around Claire, she finally couldn't stand it anymore. She took some miracle cure and made a swift recovery. The moment she was well, she came to see me. She was wearing a magnificent silk gown embroidered with 100 golden butterflies, and a golden butterfly pin trembled in her elaborate hairstyle. I stared at the pin, lost in thought. It was part of my mother's dowry. When she passed, she left 2 identical golden butterfly pins, one for my dowry, and one for Leo to give to the woman he loved. No matter how hard things got in the palace when I was a child, I never once considered selling the pin. It was the only memento our mother left us. And now Leo had given it away so easily. He'd given it to Claire, whose heart belonged to Julian. Seeing my dazed expression, Claire raised her eyebrows smugly. His Majesty and my dear Julian care about me most. Princess, you are worthless in their eyes. The moment I fell ill, they assumed you were the one who poisoned me. Before I could speak, she curled her lip and continued her mockery. So what if you have a noble title? You're still no match for me. With every word, the smile on Claire's face grew wider. She stared at me, trying to see me break. Unfortunately for her, I disappointed her. I scoffed. In that case, tell them to stop bothering me. I'm sick of looking at them. Her face instantly fell, changing expressions faster than a stage performer. She must have known that Leo and Julian had been visiting me every chance they got these past few days, which was why she was in such a hurry to recover. I twisted the knife. Do your dear brothers know this whole show was directed by you? Her face tensed, her eyes darkening. The mask of the innocent maiden fell away, revealing a twisted, cold fury. The sound of footsteps announced the arrival of Leo and Julian, who entered my chambers one after the other. They must have just finished a meeting, as they were still discussing matters as they walked. Accustomed to my ignoring them, they sat down and poured themselves tea without a second thought. Your Majesty, Julian, what are you doing here? You haven't come to see me in days. Claire scurried toward them, her eyes darting around suspiciously before she stood to the side, pouting. Perhaps realizing he had indeed neglected the story's heroine, Julian cleared his throat and covered his lips with his fist. Claire, you're here. How could I forget about you? He glanced at me, and seeing no change in my expression, he continued his explanation. His Majesty and I had business with the princess today, so we came together. Claire put on a flawless smile and tugged at Julian's sleeve, whining playfully. I'm just teasing you. You're the princess's brother and closest friend. It's only natural that you visit her. You don't need to explain anything to me. I'm not that petty. Under the cover of his wide sleeve, Julian took Claire's hand. She blushed and shot me a triumphant, provocative look over his shoulder. Your Majesty, I heard you sent out many people to find a master physician for me. I was so touched. Today, I wore the golden butterfly pin you gave me. My mother even said how beautiful it looked when I left the house. Leave it to the adored heroine to keep all her options open, never neglecting a single one of her admirers. Leo glanced at me nervously. The moment Claire mentioned the butterfly pin, I lowered my gaze, my eyes darkening. He looked away guiltily. Claire, you have a natural, refined beauty. Gold is too vulgar for you. It was a poor choice of gift on my part. How about this? The Kingdom of Viridia just sent a tribute of a pure green jade hairpin. The quality is exquisite, and I think it would suit you perfectly. I'll have Thomas send it to you later. As for this tacky thing, I'll take it back. Hearing this, I looked up at him. Leo rubbed his nose and gave me a placating smile. Whatever your Majesty says is right. I'll be waiting for that jade hairpin then. Seeing Leo's firm stance, Claire didn't dare to argue or pout. She reluctantly removed the golden butterfly pin and handed it to him. I stood up, took the pin from Leo's hand, and glanced at Claire's crestfallen face with a smirk. His Majesty is right. My mother's belongings are not for just anyone to possess. Daisy, this pin has been sullied by something unclean. Take it to the royal goldsmiths to be cleansed. Claire stomped her foot, genuinely upset now, tears streaming down her face. Your Majesty, look at the princess. From an angle Leo couldn't see, she glared at me, her eyes shooting daggers. Leo, now consumed by guilt towards me, dodged the issue. My sister has been in a bad mood lately. Claire, if there's nothing else, you should head back. Julian also chimed in. Don't be upset, Claire. If you like something, I'll buy it for you. Claire just humphed, turned and ran off crying. The day I was set to leave for the Abbey of Grace arrived. I packed my things and prepared to leave with Daisy. Leo wanted to send the Imperial Guard to escort me, and even offered to see me to the Abbey himself, but I refused without hesitation. To my surprise, when I arrived at the Abbey, Claire was also there. She followed me into my room, her eyes burning with rage. Princess, do you really think you've won? Do you know what Julian says about you? He says you're spoiled and jealous. He says his mother made a mistake arranging your marriage when you were children, and he almost had to marry a shrew like you. He's so glad he met me. He'll only ever marry me. And His Majesty, your own brother, despises you. He says you're vicious and that you've brought him nothing but shame. She narrowed her eyes, a dark smile spreading across her face. I bet you don't know, Princess, but the envoys from Viridia are arriving next month. His Majesty and Julian have already planned it all out. They're going to send you away in a political marriage to get you out of my hair for good. A sudden wave of weakness washed over me, and I collapsed to the floor. I thought my illness had taken a turn for the worse, but when I glanced at Claire, I saw she was in the same state. We've been drugged. The thought flashed through my mind just before I lost consciousness completely. I was woken by the wind. It was strong. My head throbbed, and my hands ached. When I opened my eyes, I found myself hanging from a tree on the edge of a cliff, my hands bound. Hanging on the other side was an unconscious Claire. The tree branch wasn't very thick. A man of any real weight would have snapped it by now. The person responsible stood between us, holding a knife. I recognized him. It was Theo, Julian's half-brother. Theo's mother was the old Marquis's favorite concubine, and Theo was born in the same year as Julian. After Julian's mother died, the concubine schemed endlessly to secure the title for her own son. Julian suffered greatly at her hands as a child. If my mother hadn't frequently brought him to the palace, he might have been broken completely. Once Julian gained power, he discovered that his mother's death was no accident. It was a murder plotted by the concubine and the old Marquis. He sent the concubine to her grave with a cup of poisoned wine. The old Marquis, forced to watch her die, was so grief-stricken that he had a stroke and was left paralyzed. Theo's dream of inheriting the title was shattered, and he lost his mother. He hated Julian with a burning passion. Now he was roaring like a madman. "Julian, I'm going to make you suffer. Choose. One of the women you love gets to live. The other one is coming to hell with me." Julian gritted his teeth, the veins on his forehead bulging. "Tongue. Let them go, and I'll spare your life." "Teologet mani akali." "Spare my life? You think I care about my worthless life anymore? You poisoned my mother and drove my father to a stroke. I'm going to make you taste the same pain. Enough talk. Choose now. I'll give you 15 minutes. Any later, and I'll throw them both off." Claire woke up and started screaming through her tears. "Julian, I'm scared. Save me." Julian tried to soothe her, telling her not to be afraid, that he would save her. Claire shook her head frantically, causing the already thin branch to sway violently. This only made her more terrified, and she devolved into a mess of snot and tears, a far cry from her usual delicate, innocent self. "Julian, you promised you would always put me first, no matter what." I watched the drama unfold between the main characters, feeling no fear at all. I knew that while the cliff was high, at the bottom lay a deep lake. And I, after being forced into a political marriage in my past life, was an excellent swimmer. Julian hesitated for a moment, then finally chose Claire. His eyes were slightly red as he looked deeply at me, his mouth opening and closing before forming 3 words. "I'm sorry." I smiled into the wind, speaking to him more gently than I had since my rebirth. "Julian, you've abandoned me again. Ever since we were little, my mother told me you were my future husband. As a child, you always said you would marry me when you grew up. I thought of you every day, and I made you a gift every year for your birthday. I thought that one day, when you married me, I would give you all the gifts at once. Then we grew up, and you saw me as nothing more than an obstacle between you and Claire. But Julian, I want you to remember the good things about me. I want to give you what you want, even if it means sacrificing my own life." I smiled as I said this, a few tears escaping my eyes. I meant every word of it. In my last life, Julian and Leo had personally pushed me to my death. Though I was reborn, my sick body was a constant reminder of the pain they had caused me. I didn't care if Julian loved me or chose me. I couldn't escape my own death, but while I was still alive, I wanted to leave a thorn in their hearts that they would never forget. With that, I wriggled free of the ropes myself, and my body went into a free fall. I could hear Julian on the cliff above, screaming my name, his voice filled with a raw, heart-wrenching agony. After swimming ashore from the lake, I pawned my bracelet, bought a clean set of clothes, and ordered a full spread of dishes at the Crane's Landing Inn. A group of people sat down at the next table, chattering in a foreign language. I froze, my hand hovering over a dish. It was Kale, my husband from my past life. In my previous life, after the political marriage, I had intended to make the best of my situation and live a quiet life with Kale for the sake of peace between our nations. But as it turned out, Kale was another one of the heroine's devoted admirers. Unable to have her, he had arranged to take me, her rival, away instead. He would often come to my bed at night, and as he ravaged my body, he would choke me while passionately calling out Claire's name. The disgust was so overwhelming that it would ruin his mood. His calloused hands would slap me across the face until my ears rang and bled, nearly leaving me deaf. Whenever he was unhappy, he would whip me or kick me. When he was pleased, he would throw me into water, an icy pond in winter, a scalding tub in summer, and watch me struggle in agony, which only heightened his own pleasure. He was a demon who left me covered in wounds, leading to my eventual death. If Leo and Julian were the indirect architects of my sickened body, then Cale was the monster who had carried out the torture. Reborn, all I had wanted was to escape the turmoil of my past life, but it seemed I couldn't escape it no matter what. Fine. Perhaps heaven didn't bring me back to live out my days in peace. Perhaps it took pity on my innocent suffering and gave me a chance to settle my scores. I spent 3 days recovering in an inn in the capital. When I reappeared, my portrait was plastered all over the streets. Unable to find me at the bottom of the cliff, Leo had issued a royal notice for my search. I also overheard in a tea house that 3 days ago, Julian had returned to his estate, utterly devastated. He locked himself in his room, drank himself into a stupor, and could be heard sobbing late into the night. Claire had tried to visit him multiple times but was turned away. He remained unmoved, whether she recounted their happy memories or tried to win his sympathy with tears and tantrums. I knew this was all temporary. If I did nothing, my death would soon be forgotten. They would all go back to their happy, stable lives. But how could I let that happen? So I reappeared. Leo's men found me quickly. I was escorted back to the palace. When I saw Leo again, I almost didn't recognize him. He was unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes like a panda's. He looked completely drained, as if his very life force had been sucked out. The moment he saw me, his eyes lit up. He rushed forward, his eyes red and his nose twitching, and gently took my shoulders. He choked out, "Sis, it's so good that you're alive." Then his expression turned to rage. "That damn Theo, daring to hurt my sister. I've already had him executed." I laughed as if I'd heard the funniest joke in the world. Theo isn't the one who hurt me. It was Julian. And of course Claire played her part. "My dear brother, you seem so concerned about me. What will you do when you find out your true love was one of the people who hurt me?" I watched his expression closely. His eyes flickered with guilt and a hint of panic. "Sis, I'll deal with Julian. As for Claire, she was a victim too. Sis, she was just scared, she didn't want you to die." I said calmly. "But I almost did, didn't I? In fact, I did die once. Leo, don't force yourself to stand up for me. Just treat me like you always have. I don't really care." My words were like an iron rod poking at his heart. His face paled, and he stammered, unable to speak. "Get some rest, sis." Leo fled in a panic, forgetting that this was his own study. When Julian heard I had returned alive, he immediately rushed to the palace to see me, but was blocked by Leo. That evening there was a farewell banquet for the foreign envoys. To show how much he valued me, Leo invited me to attend. Just as in my past life, Cale stood before the entire court and proposed a marriage alliance with me for the sake of diplomacy between our two nations. The ministers all voiced their approval. Our two countries were of comparable strength, but there were frequent skirmishes at the border, and the conflicts had escalated over the past 2 years. If sacrificing me could prevent a war, it was the best possible outcome. Absolutely not. Leo and Julian spoke in unison. The two men who had personally sent me to my death in my past life were now flatly rejecting this incredibly advantageous exchange. Ignoring the objections of the senior officials, Leo drank a cup of wine and said, "Diplomacy between our nations is a long-term strategy. It cannot be secured through a mere political marriage." Julian also cupped his fist in agreement. "His Majesty is absolutely right. Historically, such marriages have only maintained peace for a short time. To truly sustain a good relationship, we need a more thoughtful plan. Your Majesty, please reconsider. While diplomacy is a long-term affair, the princess's marriage can deepen our relationship and facilitate trade. Moreover, Prince Cale is handsome and brave, a truly rare match. This is a win-win situation." A senior minister knelt on the floor. "I second the motion." One by one, the ministers all knelt. Leo's face was ashen, his eyes practically shooting fire. Cale shot a provocative look at the young emperor, his gaze flickering over to Claire. Before Cale could speak again, I stood up. "I agree." All eyes in the hall snapped to me, some curious, some admiring, some shocked. "Princess." Julian, forgetting all decorum, rushed to my side and grabbed my arm, his large hand trembling slightly. Ellie, a political marriage is not a game. Let's not do this, okay? I looked at him coldly. His eyes were desperate and fervent. That day on the cliff, when I watched you jump, it felt like my heart was being ripped out. Ellie, forgive me. I only just realized how much I love you. I can't live without you. Let's ask His Majesty to grant us a marriage. We'll never be apart, okay? I burst out laughing. And what about Claire? As if to prove his words, Julian raised 2 fingers and swore. From this day forward, my heart belongs only to Ellie. There will be no one else. I smiled, a smile of release and satisfaction. Claire stood up, knocking over her teacup. She swayed on her feet, looking on the verge of tears, a picture of pitifulness. I said coldly, "But I don't love you, and I don't want to spend my life with you." The light in Julian's eyes shattered and vanished, leaving him looking like a lifeless doll. Unexpectedly, he suddenly dropped to his knees before me, clutching the hem of my skirt. "Please, Ellie, give me one more chance." "A chance? I gave you a chance. And the price was my life." Done with him, I turned to meet Leo's gaze. "Your Majesty, I ask for your consent to this marriage. For the sake of diplomacy and peace between our nations, it is my duty and responsibility as a princess." The ministers praised my righteousness, their silver tongues painting me as a saint. Leo clenched his fists tightly, closed his eyes, and then opened them again. "Granted." Julian collapsed to the floor, clutching his chest, his eyes completely dead. Before I left, I asked Leo for a secret palace drug. Anyone who takes it becomes incredibly weak and requires an antidote every half-month. A full course requires 10 doses. But the antidote I brought with me was only enough for 9. Without it, the person would die within 3 days. Along the journey, I found an opportunity to mix the drug into Kale's tea. He became completely drained of strength, his eyes vicious, as if he wanted to eat me alive. "What did you do to me?" I shrugged. "Oh, I got my hands on something interesting. Just wanted to test it out on you." Then I tossed him an antidote. Kale's face twisted in rage. He lunged at me like a furious beast. I sat in my chair unmoving. Just before his hand reached my neck, I spoke. "It acts up every half-month. The recipe for the antidote is in my head. I have to make it fresh each time." His fingers clenched into a fist, and he slammed it on the table, sending tea sloshing everywhere. I smirked. He was angry already? This was just the beginning. The journey to Kale's kingdom had taken him 5 days. The return trip took half a month. Along the way, I ordered him to catch fish and hunt rabbits for me, to roast meat for me, to serve me tea and water. At first, Kale resisted, his eyes spitting fire. But he was at my mercy and had no choice but to submit. I started pushing my luck. If the meat was too dry, I would scold him in front of the servants. If the fish was burned, I made him eat all of it. If he threw up, even better, he had to pick it up and eat it again. If he spilled water on my hand while serving me, I would kick him in the shins. Seeing him furious but unable to retaliate filled me with joy. Gradually, Kale got used to serving me. When we passed a river, he would order the caravan to stop, go into the water to catch fish, cook it for me, and then bring me a cup of water, all in one smooth motion. Habit is a terrifying thing. After we arrived, Kale's father, the Khan of the enemy nation, held a grand wedding for us. That night, I went to bed on my own without waiting for Kale to return to our room. When he embraced me from behind, I kicked him off the bed. He stared at me, his eyes wide with surprise and hurt. A brawny man from the steppes making a wounded expression was quite comical. I picked up the ceremonial rod used to lift the veil and beat him with it. Kale didn't dare fight back, only dodging clumsily. Satisfied, I tossed the rod aside and went back to sleep. I had a dream. I dreamt of my past life, when Kale threw me into the icy pond. I shivered violently from the cold while he stood on the bank, laughing and drinking. When I woke up, my chest was tight with anger. The sight of Kale only fueled my rage. I had Daisy find someone to make me a leather whip, one that was light to hold but whistled through the air, promising immense pain with every lash. After that, every time I had a nightmare, I would grab the whip and lash out at Kale, who slept on the floor. Over time, his body was a permanent tapestry of old scars and new welts. For more months passed like this. My time was running out, and my illness grew so severe that I could no longer hide it from Kale. One time, after whipping him, I was so exhausted that I coughed up a mouthful of blood and fainted. When I woke up, Kale was holding my hand, crying like a 200-pound child. "Princess, don't sleep. Get up and hit me again. I've fallen in love with you. Hitting is affection, scolding is love. A day without you hitting or scolding me just doesn't feel right. I can't live without you anymore." His crying gave me a headache. I opened my eyes and slapped him across the face. "You're so noisy." Seeing me awake, he wept with joy. I don't know what Kale did, but from that day on he seemed to have no other duties. He stuck to my side constantly, fussing over me, trying everything to make me happy. If I seemed gloomy, he would hand me the whip and ask me to hit him. For the first time in either of my lives, I realized Kale was a masochist. Or maybe not. He was still one dose short of the full antidote. My periods of lucidity grew shorter. Finally, one day, after a coughing fit that left me spitting blood, I lay in bed as doctor after doctor came, shook their heads and left. Kale knelt by my bed, tears welling in his eyes. "Am I going to die?" I asked weakly. He shook his head like a drum. "No, you won't die. I won't let you die." I smiled at him. I always knew I was going to die. "Kale, why don't you come with me?" Kale's eyes widened in disbelief. "Everything I am now is because of you. Kale, I never intended for you to live. Let's go to hell together." He nodded repeatedly, smiling through his tears. "Okay, we'll go to hell together." I died. After death, my soul floated into the air. I saw Kale clinging to my corpse, refusing to let them bury me. The Khan knocked him unconscious. When Kale woke up, he stumbled to my grave and smashed his head against my tombstone until he died. Blood dripped from his eyes and mouth. "Don't leave me," he whispered. He died, joining me in death. My soul returned to my homeland. Leo and Julian learned everything Claire had done to me, how she had framed me, manipulated them into misunderstanding me, and caused them to lose me. They joined forces and tore down her family. The entire clan was exiled. Before the exile, Leo deliberately told Claire's father that the architect of their downfall was his most beloved daughter. On the road to exile, Claire was sold to a low-class brothel. Because of her stunning looks, she was forced to service an endless stream of clients. Eventually, she contracted a disease and died. Julian built a memorial tomb for me in his estate and never married. Leo became a rare, enlightened emperor. He worked tirelessly, reviewing official documents until dawn and listening to wise counsel. Unfortunately, he overworked his body and passed away in less than a decade. When he died, he was clutching the golden butterfly pin so tightly they couldn't pry it from his hand.